Right now, somewhere along your fence line, in the cracks of your patio, or hiding under your hedges, there's a plant you've been ripping out for years without ever knowing what it actually does. Most of us learned the same lesson growing up. If it wasn't planted on purpose, it's a weed, and weeds get pulled. Before it even has a chance to flower, out come the gloves, the spray bottle or the hoe, and the whole thing gets tossed in the yard waste bin without a second thought. But some of the toughest, most persistent problem plants in your yard have quietly fed, healed, and protected people for thousands of years before anyone ever called them a nuisance. One entry on this list was carried by soldiers into battle because it could stop bleeding faster than anything else they had on hand. Another was brewed into a coffee substitute during wartime rationing, and enough people came to prefer it that it never really went away, even after real coffee came back on the shelves. A few of these plants are doing hard, invisible work underground right now, breaking up soil your grass can't handle on its own, and undoing damage that would otherwise take a rototiller and a bag of amendments to fix. Stick with me, because by the end of this list, you'll never look at your own yard or the things you've been pulling out of it quite the same way again. Let's get into it. Number 12, henbit. Small, square-stemmed, and covered in tiny purple-pink flowers that show up early in spring before almost anything else has woken up, henbit carpets bare patches of lawn and garden beds and gets mowed down without a second thought. Most people assume it's just another cool season nuisance clogging up the lawn before summer grass takes over. What they're missing is that henbit is completely edible, mild, and slightly sweet, with a flavor some foragers compare to a cross between kale and clover. The young leaves and stems can go straight into a salad, get tossed into a stir-fry, or blended into a smoothie for an early spring nutrient boost when most garden vegetables haven't even been planted yet. Henbit is part of the mint family, and like many of its relatives, it carries mild anti-inflammatory compounds that traditional herbalists once used in teas to ease minor aches and support digestion. It's also one of the earliest nectar sources for bees coming out of winter, flowering weeks before most ornamental plants even bud. Bees that emerge hungry and find nothing to eat don't survive long, and henbit is one of the few things standing between them and an empty landscape in late winter. It grows fast, spreads easily, and dies back on its own once the weather warms, which means it never overstays its welcome the way some perennial weeds do. Before mowing over the next patch of it, it might be worth picking a handful for dinner instead. Even gardeners who never plan to eat it often let a patch or two stay through late winter just for the pollinator boost, then clear it away once summer grass takes over on its own. Number 11, ground ivy, sometimes called creeping Charlie. This one spreads low across shaded lawns in dense mats of round, scalloped leaves, rooting at every node it touches and driving homeowners with a shade garden absolutely crazy. It has a reputation as one of the hardest lawn weeds to get rid of, and that reputation isn't wrong. But ground ivy has a long history that predates the modern lawn entirely. Before hops became the standard bittering agent in beer, ground ivy was used across medieval Europe to flavor and preserve ale, which is where one of its old nicknames, alehoof, comes from. The leaves carry a sharp, slightly minty, slightly bitter aroma when crushed, and traditional herbalists brewed them into tea to help clear congestion and soothe minor coughs during cold season. It was also historically used in small amounts as a topical wash for minor skin irritation, thanks to natural compounds with mild antiseptic properties. Ecologically, ground ivy thrives specifically in the shady, poor-draining corners of a yard where turf grass struggles to establish itself, which means it's often filling a gap that nothing else particularly wants. Its dense mat also helps hold soil in place on shaded slopes where erosion is a real problem. It's aggressive, no question. But aggressive isn't always the same as useless. Sometimes it's just the plant doing the job nobody assigned it. Number 10, shepherd's purse. Named for its small, flat, heart-shaped seed pods that look almost exactly like a tiny purse, this unassuming little plant with a rosette of jagged leaves and a thin flowering stalk pops up in disturbed soil, garden edges, and cracks in pavement everywhere. Most people walk right past it without a second look. Herbalists have not. Shepherd's purse has one of the longest documented histories of any wild plant used to help control bleeding, both internally and on minor cuts and scrapes applied directly as a poultice. It was carried in field kits by soldiers and midwives for centuries specifically because it was reliable, common, and grew practically everywhere they needed it. Modern research has continued to study the compounds responsible, and while it's not a replacement for medical care, the traditional reputation is backed by centuries of consistent, independent use across different cultures. Nutritionally, the young leaves are edible, with a peppery bite similar to arugula or watercress, and they can be tossed into salads or added to soups the same way you'd use mustard greens. The seed pods themselves have a spicy, almost horseradish-like kick when eaten fresh off the stalk. Shepherd's purse also matures fast, going from seed to flower in a matter of weeks, which is exactly why it shows up first in freshly disturbed soil. It's one of nature's fastest ground cover fixes for bare dirt that would otherwise wash away in the next hard rain. Number 9. Wild chicory. Tall, wiry stems topped with strikingly blue, almost impossibly bright flowers that open in the morning and close by afternoon. Chicory grows along roadsides, fence lines, and neglected corners of yards where most people assume it's just an overgrown weed with pretty flowers and nothing else going for it. That assumption has cost people a lot of good coffee. Chicory root, when roasted and ground, has been used as a coffee substitute and additive for centuries, most famously in New Orleans, where it became a permanent part of the local coffee tradition rather than a wartime substitute people abandoned once real coffee came back. The roasted root has a deep, slightly bitter, almost chocolatey flavor that many people genuinely prefer, caffeine-free and gentler on the stomach. Beyond the root, chicory leaves are edible too, closely related to endive and radicchio, with a similarly bitter bite that mellows significantly when cooked, sautéed with garlic, or wilted into a pan the way you'd treat any hearty green. Traditional use also includes chicory root as a mild digestive support, largely credited to its high inulin content, a type of soluble fiber that also happens to feed beneficial gut bacteria. Chicory's deep taproot pulls nutrients up from far below the surface, and once established, the plant tolerates drought, poor soil, and neglect better than almost anything planted on purpose. It keeps coming back for a reason. Number 8. Wild amaranth, often called pigweed. Tall, fast-growing with reddish stems and dense clusters of tiny green flowers, pigweed shows up aggressively in vegetable gardens and disturbed soil, and most gardeners rip it out on site because it competes hard with whatever they're actually trying to grow. Here's what gets lost in that fight. Amaranth is one of the most nutritionally significant plants on this entire list. The leaves are packed with protein, calcium, iron, and vitamins A and C at levels that rival or beat many cultivated leafy greens, and they can be cooked exactly the way you'd cook spinach or Swiss chard, sautéed, wilted into soup, or folded into a frittata. The seeds are where things get genuinely interesting. Amaranth grain has been cultivated as a staple crop across Central and South America for thousands of years. Valued as a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, something most plant foods can't claim on their own. Wild amaranth seeds can be harvested in late summer, dried, and used the exact same way as store-bought amaranth grain, cooked as a hot cereal, popped like tiny popcorn, or ground into flour. It's a plant that farmers spend money fighting in their fields, while health food stores sell its cultivated cousin at a premium in the grain aisle. The next time it shows up uninvited in a garden bed, it might be worth asking what it's actually offering before pulling it. Number 7. Cleavers, sometimes called catchweed, because of the tiny hooked hairs covering every stem and leaf that latch onto clothing, fur, and skin the moment you brush past it. Most people know this plant only as the sticky, clingy nuisance tangled through hedges and fences in spring, and they're usually annoyed by the time they get it off their sleeve. What they don't know is that cleavers has one of the longer traditional uses in Western herbalism as a gentle support for the lymphatic system, historically brewed into tea to help the body manage fluid retention and support the glands responsible for filtering waste. It was also used topically, crushed fresh, and applied to minor skin irritation, where its mild astringent properties were believed to help calm redness and swelling. The young shoots, harvested before the hooked hairs get too tough, are edible and can be cooked down the same way spinach is, since cooking softens the texture completely and removes the stickiness that makes the raw plant unpleasant to eat. Traditionally, roasted cleaver seeds have even been used as a coffee substitute, since the plant is a distant relative of coffee and shares some of the same aromatic compounds when roasted. Cleavers grows fast and dies back on its own by midsummer, meaning it never sticks around long enough to become a permanent fixture the way some perennial weeds do. It shows up, does its work, and moves on before most people even notice it flowered. Number 6. Wild lettuce. Tall, with a spiny midrib and pale yellow flowers. Wild lettuce grows in neglected lots, fence lines, and the back corners of yards where nobody's paying close attention. And it's frequently mistaken for an oversized, bitter version of the lettuce in your garden bed that somehow went wrong. In a sense, that's not far off, since it's a genuine wild relative of cultivated lettuce. But wild lettuce carries something the grocery store version doesn't. When the stem is cut or broken, it releases a milky white sap that traditional herbalists have used for centuries as a mild, natural sedative, historically applied to help with restlessness and support sleep, which is where the plant earned the nickname opium lettuce, despite containing none of the compounds found in actual opium. The bitter young leaves are edible, though most people cook them rather than eating them raw, since bitterness mellows significantly with heat, similar to how dandelion greens change once wilted in a pan. Traditional use also includes the sap being applied topically in small amounts for minor skin irritation. Wild lettuce grows tall fast, often reaching several feet in a single season, and its deep taproot helps it access water and nutrients. Other shallow-rooted plants nearby can't reach, which is part of why it tends to thrive in exactly the dry, neglected spots where nothing else wants to grow. Number 5. Burdock. Large, coarse leaves and round, prickly burrs that cling to anything that brushes past them, burdock has a reputation as one of the more stubborn and unwelcome plants a yard can produce, mostly because of those burrs and the deep, thick taproot that makes it genuinely hard to pull. That same root, though, has been a staple vegetable in parts of Asia for centuries, known as gobo, roasted, simmered in broths, or stir-fried, valued for its earthy, slightly sweet flavor and crisp texture even after cooking. Burdock root is also rich in inulin, the same prebiotic fiber found in chicory, which supports digestive health by feeding beneficial gut bacteria. Traditional Western and Eastern herbal medicine both independently arrived at using burdock root as a blood purifier and skin support, historically brewed into tea or tincture to help manage minor skin conditions like acne and eczema. The young leaves, harvested before the plant matures, are edible too, though they need to be cooked to mellow their bitterness, similar to other coarse wild greens on this list. Burdock's massive taproot, often extending more than 2 feet into the ground, breaks up compacted soil dramatically, opening channels for air and water in ground that's been packed down for years. When it eventually decomposes, it leaves behind loosened, mineral-rich soil that the next plant in that spot benefits from without ever knowing why. Number 4. Stinging nettle. Almost everyone who's brushed against this plant remembers it, the sharp, immediate sting from tiny hollow hairs covering the stem, and leaves that inject a mix of natural chemicals the moment they're touched. That reputation alone gets nettle pulled, sprayed, and avoided more aggressively than almost anything else on this list. It's also one of the most nutrient-dense wild greens that grows in North America. Once cooked or dried, the stinging compounds break down completely, and the leaves become safe and genuinely delicious, packed with iron, calcium, magnesium, and more protein preserving than most leafy greens sold in stores. Traditional use includes nettle tea as a general tonic, and modern interest in the plant has only grown as more people rediscover what generations of foragers already knew. Nettle also has a long history as a natural fiber plant, spun into cloth and rope in parts of Europe long before cotton became widely available, and some of that tradition survives today in small-scale textile projects. In the garden, nettle patches tend to indicate genuinely rich, nitrogen-heavy soil, since the plant thrives specifically in fertile ground, which means a nettle patch is often a quiet signal about what's happening underground rather than a random accident. Harvested carefully with gloves, it becomes soup, tea, or a cooked green indistinguishable from spinach by the time it hits the plate. Fear of the sting keeps most people from ever finding that out. Number 3. Wild horsetail. Unlike almost anything else on this list, horsetail doesn't flower at all. It sends up jointed, hollow bamboo-like stems that look almost prehistoric, and that's not far from the truth, since horsetail is a living relative of plants that dominated the landscape hundreds of millions of years before flowering plants existed. It shows up in damp, poorly drained corners of a yard, and most people treat it as an aggressive, hard-to-kill nuisance. Which, to be fair, it can be. But horsetail has one of the highest natural silica contents of any plant on Earth, and that mineral has made it a traditional go-to for supporting strong hair, nails, and connective tissue when brewed into tea, a use that shows up independently across European and Asian herbal traditions. Its rough, gritty texture historically earned it the nickname scouring rush, since dried stems were literally used to scrub pots and polish metal and wood before modern abrasives existed. Horsetail also thrives specifically in compacted, poorly draining soil, which means a horsetail patch is often pointing directly at a drainage problem worth addressing rather than a plant worth fighting on its own. Its extensive underground root system, called a rhizome, helps stabilize wet, loose soil along ditches and low spots, reducing erosion in exactly the kind of ground that erodes fastest. Number 2. Milk thistle. Tall, spiny, with striking purple flowers and distinctive white marbled leaves, milk thistle has an intimidating appearance that keeps most people at arm's length, and the sharp spines along every leaf edge make it genuinely unpleasant to handle without gloves. Underneath that defensive exterior is one of the most extensively studied medicinal plants in the world. Milk thistle seeds contain a compound called silymarin, which has been the subject of decades of modern research into liver support and antioxidant activity, building directly on centuries of traditional use where the plant was specifically reached for to support liver health after periods of poor diet or heavy drinking. That's not folklore invented recently. Physicians and herbalists going back to ancient Greece documented using milk thistle for the same general purpose, and the tradition carried forward largely unchanged for 2,000 years before modern labs started isolating the compounds responsible. The young leaves, with the spines carefully trimmed away, are edible and can be cooked down like a coarse green, and the roasted seeds have historically been used as a coffee substitute similar to chicory and cleavers. Milk thistle tends to show up in disturbed, nutrient-poor soil, and its deep taproot works the same way burdocks does, breaking up hard ground and pulling minerals up from below. A plant covered in spines specifically to protect itself has spent centuries protecting something else entirely. Number 1. Self-heal. Also known as heal-all, this unassuming purple-flowered lawn plant survives regular mowing with ease. Its name isn't marketing. Unrelated herbal traditions across Europe, Asia, and North America independently discovered that it heals wounds and reduces inflammation. When disconnected cultures reach identical conclusions, there is usually real science behind it. Modern research confirms this, identifying antioxidant, antimicrobial, and antiviral properties in the plant. Historically, people crushed fresh leaves straight onto cuts and scrapes for immediate relief, or steeped the dried plant into tea to soothe sore throats. The entire plant is edible, offering a mild, slightly bitter taste that works well raw in salads or lightly wilted. Highly resilient against poor soil, drought, and mowing, self-heal thrives quietly in lawns everywhere. It doesn't show off like flashier flowers, which is precisely why it has survived for centuries, helping people right under their feet. 12 plants, and every single one of them was already doing something worthwhile long before anyone decided it needed to be pulled. Some feed the bees, keeping the rest of the yard alive during the exact weeks when almost nothing else is blooming. Some feed people directly, quietly outperforming vegetables grown on purpose a few feet away, without ever needing a seed packet, fertilizer, or a single hour of weeding. And some are working underground right now, breaking up soil, pulling up minerals from levels no shovel ever reaches, and fixing drainage and compaction problems that would otherwise cost real money and real effort to solve any other way. None of this means every weed in a yard deserves a free pass, and there are plenty of genuinely invasive, problematic plants worth removing. If this changed the way you'll look at your own backyard, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if there's a plant you've always wondered about, drop it in the comments below. It might just end up on the next list. Thanks for watching.